All right, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Blue Stable Podcast. It is I, Michael Pivia, joined by me, Landon Oliver. Man, Landon, we finally have news. The road has finally come to an end on this godforsaken coaching search, and it looks like the Colts have zeroed in on their guy. Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen is being targeted as the next head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Landon, tell me, man. I know we were joking. We had a show the other day where we gave our guesses. I gave Shane, you gave Brian Callahan. The next day, Brian Callahan is eliminated as a candidate. But Shane Steichen, okay, outside of DeMarco Murray, D'Amico Ryans, Shane Steichen was probably the number two on the list the entire time for a lot of people. You were a big Raheem Morris guy. He was notified. He was out of the list. I think it really came down to Steichen and Morris, and both of them really had a good shot at the job. What is your reaction, though, to Shane Steichen being targeted as the coach, and do you think it is a home run hire?
Yeah, well, one, I'm just glad it's over. So, seemingly over. Nothing's official until it's official, as we know. But yeah, I mean, this was one of the 2 to 3 best case scenarios. Going into this coaching search was landing a guy with the acumen of Shane Steichen. He's ran the Eagles offense the last couple of years. I know Nick Sirianni actually was calling the plays. The Eagles were struggling with him calling plays, so he took a step back and said, "Hey, Shane, will you be the offensive coordinator, not just in title, but where you actually call the plays?" And it seems like ever since he's taken over, the Eagles have really kind of taken off. And we saw that mid-season last year whenever he took over the play calling duties. The Eagles, of course, go on that run. They make the playoffs. And then this year, they're playing today, Super Bowl Sunday. So, yeah, it's, he has the acumen of being an offensive genius. He's worked with some great quarterbacks, going back to Phillip Rivers, helping develop Justin Herbert before ultimately, landing in Philadelphia and helping develop Jalen Hurts. So this was all really good, info that they were looking for going into this coaching search from him. And really it came down to what type of a leader is he? He has a little bit more of a fiery personality, as opposed to someone I've seen him compared to Frank Reich, I guess because the Eagles offensive coordinator thing. I've seen that run around on Twitter, and they couldn't be further, different. And, Shane, they both lead in very different ways. And, Shane's a lot more fiery. I think he's a lot more like Nick Sirianni than he is more like Frank Reich. So I'm excited. I know these were the two names that were floated out to me, I want to say Thursday night. I was talking to some guys, and obviously we recorded our show on Wednesday, so it was like, well, Brian Callahan, I'd heard that he had interviewed really well, and then the next day he got eliminated as soon as I said it on the show, and I was like, well, I think I was talking to James Boyd. I said, look, if me looking like an idiot on the internet is what we need for this to, hurry to get going, then I'll gladly take that bullet. So luckily, it ended up being good. And as I said, nothing's official until it's official, but it seems like it's trending that way. And Shane Steichen will be the new head coach. I'm really excited about it, and it gives us a lot more clarity going into this offseason.
Yeah, and most likely it's been reported from what I've heard, Gus Bradley will be retained. Him and the defensive staff will be retained. That was reported about a couple of weeks ago that, obviously the Colts were blocking the coaches from interviewing elsewhere. Well, namely Gus Bradley from interviewing elsewhere for DC jobs. And the Colts wanted these candidates to keep the staff on, and Steichen was indeed one of those candidates. And it's looking like the defensive staff is going to stay. Now, in terms of Shane Steichen, before we get to the potential offensive staff, for Shane, maybe risky business announcing it and making it look obvious to everybody on the day of the Super Bowl. I saw that you tweeted it out. I mentioned the same thing. I'm thinking the same thing right now. The Eagles have a bad offensive game, and now everybody's going to go, no, Shane Steichen is not the guy we need to hire. No, he is a bad choice. Like,
Yeah,
One game out of the entire
surely Twitter won't overreact to anything.
yes.
I mean,
Even if that did happen, Shane Steichen is still the guy that everybody was drooling over for the last 5 months. So I'm not going to have one game, change that. We'll still see if that happens. Colts fans are definitely going to have a special eye on this game already now that it's been announced. Of course, like you said, thanks to Josh McDaniels, nothing is ever official until the pen meets the paper, and that probably will happen maybe tomorrow on Monday. But for sure, Jim Irsay's down in Phoenix, for the Super Bowl. I think maybe every owner is for the Super Bowl, for Super Bowl activities, the whole entire NFL circles, agents, everyone's in the Super Bowl. So this is a big deal. This is a big deal. And this was a guy that I thought the Colts would not be able to land. It's been, put out more and more and more that Jim is staying out of the way. He's letting Chris do his job. He's letting Chris talk to the coach on how they want to build the team. And, man, I said it on the last show. I'll say it again. Good job, Jim Irsay. He didn't let his pride get in the way and hire Jeff Saturday. So Shane Steichen is here. Now, we'll have a lot more time to discuss about him, to discuss about what he can, bring to the team. But now two things come to mind. First off, who could be the offensive staff that gets assembled? And now, what are we looking at quarterback? Because over in Philadelphia, he's worked, like you mentioned earlier, he's worked with Justin Herbert, helped develop him a little bit. And then you've seen the resurgence in Jalen Hurts' career. He was bad at throwing the football last year. He was bad. Well, maybe not bad, like bottom 30 bad, but he was not that great. I mean, you go back to the playoff game against Tampa Bay, dude could not hit a slant to save his life. Now he comes back. His mechanics seem much more better. He's more comfortable in the scheme. He has chemistry down. Everything about his game is much better. In my opinion, probably should have won MVP, but that didn't happen. But to say the least, this guy can work with quarterbacks, can help build a good game plan and play call around the quarterback's strengths. Now, talking about quarterback, now it's like, man, is it not just, it was before it was thought of as maybe Bryce Young isn't the type of guy Chris Ballard would hire, but Chris Ballard has to work with the head coach. And if the head coach likes Bryce Young and says, I can build around this guy, I need this guy, I think Bryce Young is now in play for Indianapolis. What do you think about Bryce Young and now looking at who the head coach might be, who fits Shane's scheme best?
Yeah, well, really, I think all four of these quarterbacks are in play now. And before, I think it was pretty settled on, Stroud and Levis. And I still think that, but I think this opens the door for a guy like Anthony Richardson or, even Bryce Young, to be the guy. But at the end of the day, I mean, they'll all sit down and they'll work through it together. But Chris Ballard's still the GM. It's still his call on who they go and go with in the draft. And these guys put in a tremendous amount of work, and they're really just now going to start beginning this process as, over the next few weeks, as, the Shane Steichen hire is finalized. If it does become finalized, I'm going to keep putting that out there. It's still not official yet, but if everything gets finalized like we expect it to over the next few days, he'll come in. Obviously, there's going to be a grace period of, meeting everybody in the building, going over the film from last year, getting his staff hired. I mean, there's a lot of work to do now. And that's part of, what kind of held everything up is, especially with the Super Bowl and especially with them going down this path now, it's almost like you're kind of beginning a little bit behind the eight ball. So there's a good chance, though, that Ballard and his staff, now that we know they're still staying on board, there is some continuity there. So I don't necessarily think Steichen's going to come in and just completely start running the scouting and running, like, hey, this is the guy I want, go get me this guy. As we've seen before, that's what's gotten the Colts into some trouble the last few years, with Frank Reich, and what was ultimately the downfall of the previous head coach was, go get me this guy. So I think they've kind of learned their lesson a little bit, like, hey, let's work together and we can see, about what you want on offense, what works for you and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, It's ultimately going to be who Chris Ballard feels is the best guy forward, to build this franchise around. And it's up to the coaches at that point to make that work, not as opposed to drafting a player for your scheme. You want to build your scheme around your player. So, I don't know if it necessarily changes much, but I do think it does open the door a little bit more for possibly one of these bigger upside guys, even, like an Anthony Richardson, and, has some of the stuff that can succeed. And I know I've talked about Anthony Richardson. I've got a post on Twitter about him. Anybody's curious, and there's been a lot of great videos recently come out from other guys about him. But yeah, I mean, I think all four of these guys are options, and I think they really were options all along, just because we're still so early in the process. They haven't sat down and really went through anything. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next few months. Combine starts at the end of this month, going into March. Then obviously you've got your pro days kicking off as well. And then ultimately, they're going to take, about a month or so and regroup and go over all the film and stuff. And that's really when Shane Steichen will be a part of this, is after, all he gets settled in and goes through his process, and, the staff has a chance to meet and talk about all that. And then the last few weeks, leading up to the draft, that's when everything's really going to start grinding out. So I'm excited to see it. It's, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and this is where the Colts need to be. And also, to credit Jim Irsay the same way you did, he's always been like this, really, when it's come to head coaching searches. He's always seemed to stay out of it and let his GM do his job. Obviously, the last few months has been a little rocky with everything that happened. But, one thing he is, man, is he's a it's possible, man. It's definitely possible, Drake. So it'll be exciting. But back to Irsay, he seems to be a man of his word when it comes to this type of stuff, and he very rarely gets involved. So I know I've mentioned it here on the show. I've mentioned it on Twitter. I've mentioned it a few other places, that I think everybody just, the way the season went, the way it ended with the Saturday hire, everything was just raw. There's a lot of emotion involved. And, that's what fans do. That's what we as fans do, is we feed off of the emotion and what we're feeling. But really, if you look at it logically, you look at the patterns of the way the organization has behaved really over the last 25 years. It was a place that this is where it needed to go. And this is the decision that Ballard needed to make. This is a decision the team needed to make. And so props to Jim Irsay for taking a step back, letting Ballard choose his head coach. And now this is really where it begins, because Ballard's going to get a shot. He's going to choose his coach. He's going to choose his quarterback. So this is all on him at this point if nothing works out. So this is, kind of the last hoorah for him. And we as fans, and I know we all hope it does work out, because if it works out, there's a very good shot this team's very successful in the near future.
Yeah, I would love for it to work out, because Chris Ballard is still a really good drafter. So as long as you're able to get that young talent in here, develop it, and I mean, you've seen it all over the field. I mean, Shaquille Leonard came in, he was graded as the worst pick in the draft, and then in the second game in his career had 19 tackles, helped the Colts win the game. So in terms of, the hire, I'm like, I get it. There's a lot of excitement. This is just me personally, a lot of excitement, home run hire. Guy's never been a head coach. I'm not going to call it a home run, but I think he was the best candidate behind D'Amico Ryans that you could get in this cycle. And hype is around this guy. He is intelligent. He is a leader. You're seeing the way this offense plays in Philadelphia, and you want to imagine that it can happen in Indianapolis. Offensive line definitely needs to pick itself up before that happens. But, man, this is just such a solid hire for the Colts. And they got their guy. They didn't overthink it, bringing guys in. I don't believe there was any legitimacy that Wink Martindale would have gotten the job. I don't think he was anywhere close to getting the job. But, if you would have made that hire, that would have been overthinking it. That would have been overdoing it. But just sticking to your guns and hiring guys, I like it. I like it. Now, when it comes to his offensive staff, there's a really hot name out there that I would love to come over as as OC, and that's Brian Johnson. But it does seem that the Eagles are going to give him a promotion and take over the offensive coordinator spot in Philadelphia. I would love for him to follow Shane and come be the quarterback coach here and, maybe get I'm not entirely sure what his full title is in Philadelphia. I'm not sure if he's the pass game coordinator. If he's not, come get another promotion, pass game coordinator and quarterback coach for the Colts. If not Brian Johnson, and first off, give your thoughts on Brian Johnson, but who is another name that can be in? I've mentioned him before. People should know how I feel about him already, but who's another guy you think could be brought over that fits with Shane Steichen as the OC?
Well, yeah. Well, to the first part, Brian Johnson is very highly thought of in league circles. He's been a rising star really over the last few years, and it's just kind of a matter of time before he gets that role as an OC. So I think it would be an awesome get, best case scenario for the Colts if it does happen. I don't envision it happening. And also, too, you got to think not only is he already in Philly, but I mean, they have a lot better of a roster to work with, to possibly catapult him into that next head coaching role, kind of similar to Shane Steichen. So, we'll see what happens. It's still early. Money talks, obviously. So we'll see if they open up the checkbook and get whoever they want in here. Another guy that I would be really liking is, I know he's been mentioned, by a few people on Twitter as well, but and that's a guy Colts fans should be really familiar with, and that's Pep Hamilton. I'd love to see Pep Hamilton back here, especially with a really good roster, possibly that could be built by Chris Ballard as opposed to the roster he got with Ryan Grigson. Obviously, it was basically just T.Y. Hilton and Andrew Luck out there, just creating. And that was it. So there wasn't really a lot to work with, and they never had a dynamic running back at all. I know that was a big part of Pep Hamilton's game. Was they love to set up the play action, they love a strong offensive line, and they love a good running game. And the Colts do have a really good running back in Jonathan Taylor. Let's not forget, based off this last year, and they still have some pieces on the offensive line that I think, add a few tweaks in there, and it could be a really strong unit once again. And there's a lot more weapons. So really, I think Pep Hamilton would do a great job, and he's really grown as well from his last stint as the Colts coach. It's been almost 10 years since then, and he's learned a lot in his travels, and he's done some really impressive work. I thought he was really impressive in Houston last year, without a lot of pieces as well down there. So I would like to see Pep, get a shot. And if Brian Johnson doesn't come, I don't expect it to happen. That's just pipe dreaming. But, like I said, you never know.
Hey, I would love Pep Hamilton, and that's the guy that I mentioned earlier. People should already know how I feel about him. Hell, some may argue that he should have taken over the interim job should Chuck Pagano have been fired in 2014 because the team was just bad all over the place. He was supposed to be the defensive guy. Remember, the defense was bottom 5 in the NFL, and it just wasn't working out, and he gets scapegoated. Chad Chazinski comes in, and the offense performs the same. So, kind of messed up his momentum at becoming a head coach, Pep Hamilton, that is. But remember, Pep Hamilton does have a lot of clout as well, too, and he is good friends with a guy who Jim Irsay really loves, and we've talked about him, Jim Harbaugh. They worked with each other at Stanford and worked with Andrew Luck, another quarterback guy Pep Hamilton is. So he would be Shane Steichen's Brian Johnson. Well,
also, too, there's also a guy, Kevin Patullo. He is actually the Eagles passing game coordinator. Mm-hmm. So it's not Brian Johnson is their quarterback coach, but their passing game coordinator is Kevin Patullo. So he could be a guy as well that they can bring in. Also, you got to think from his time with the Chargers as well. You have guys like Mike McCoy that's still out there. I'm trying to think who else was the coach over there. There's Scott Turner was out there. I know whenever they worked together. There's another guy too out there, Anthony Lynn. That's right, the head coach. Yeah, Anthony Lynn, the former head coach for the Chargers. He's an offensive guy as well. so he could possibly be in line. They worked together in Los Angeles. So, yeah, man, there's a lot of really great connections. He's been around a lot of really good coaches, a lot of really good offensive coaches as well, which I think is the direction this team needs to head in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think this could end up being a very fruitful hire for the coach, for the coaches to come in, run this offense. They get a chance to select a quarterback here in this draft in April, which is every coach's dream. You want to be able to draft your guy. You want to be able to draft your guy early. They have a top 4 pick, so really they can make any of these guys a great offer to come in and say, "Hey, we're going to get our quarterback of the future. You're going to have a chance to build from the ground up with this guy." And yeah, it's a very alluring job.
Yeah, I think so. And he's not necessarily inheriting the greatest offense. I mean, there's some holes there, but you got your cornerstones. You got Jonathan Taylor. I'm pretty sure he's not going anywhere. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's not. Jonathan Taylor. You got Michael Pittman as your wide receiver 1, and you just drafted Alec Pierce, who was your jump ball guy. Clearly, he's still developed. He can still develop and become a possession receiver and not just a jump ball guy. After those two, it gets a little murky, so they got to make decisions on Paris Campbell, Ashton Doolin, maybe other free agents. Do they bring somebody in the draft? Also, the development of Mike Strawn, where is that at? Is Shane going to want to move further in that development or cut ties? Tight end, I mean, outside of Jelani Woods, Kylan Granson, you like the work that they showed. Unfortunately, Drew Ogletree did get injured in preseason, and that was a guy who was catching a lot of hype. He was getting first-team reps in training camp, but unfortunately had I believe it was a knee injury, right? ACL?
Yeah.
It was ACL, out for the year. I would really love to just cut Mo Alley-Cox. I know he's got 2 more years on his deal, but at this point, I just don't see the reason to have him on anymore. The breakout season's not coming. Cut him, cut your losses, get a vet tight end in here, and really just help these young guys really figure it out. I know Gerald Everett is discussed as a possible cut from the Chargers. That could be a guy that they could target, but I would like to think that Shane Steichen can have some success with this. Now, obviously, Matt Ryan, got to figure out what you're going to do there. Really what the Colts and Matt Ryan are going to do individually. What are they going to do? Nick Foles, he's on a 2-year deal. What are you going to do with that? Are you comfortable with him being your quarterback too? And then I'm really intrigued to see what Shane thinks of the current roster right now. Like who should probably be kept, and what those conversations are going to go on with Chris Ballard. And like you said, they're going to evaluate. And another key point that you said, they're going to get behind the A ball a little bit. They're starting far behind. Everyone else has already done. They're already done evaluating, right? Like more than half the league is done evaluating. The Colts haven't even started evaluating yet. Chris Ballard's been busy with head coaching search, and obviously the scouts are working on college guys. Who has been evaluating the current team? And there's been no coach to evaluate with. So now you come in, you meet everybody, you start evaluating, and boom, guess what? Combine's here in 2 weeks. Now you got to go to the combine. Now you got to go to pro days. And it's going to be a very busy few months for Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen and the rest of the organization, man. I know they're probably not going to get much sleep going forward. They're going to be some busy guys, and maybe they might get some sleep in the summer. Who knows? But anything else that you want to add, man? I know it's Super Bowl Sunday. We don't want to be here all day. We want to go have some drinks, have some food, and really watch a good game.
Yeah, no, I mean I think you put it really well. Is there's going to be a really busy time period now because when you haven't even finalized the head coaching hire, so
Yep.
you still got to get through that. Then you got to hire an offensive staff. As far as I know, Gus Bradley will be back, and that staff will be back. And it wasn't like the Colts were blocking them from going other places; they were blocking other teams from requesting interviews. So I mean, like if those guys wanted out and those guys wanted to leave, they can leave. Nobody's ever trapped in the NFL. That's not how things work. You're never held hostage.
That's a good way of saying it.
Yeah. So some of the reports on that were just kind of funny, saying like, "Oh, well, the Colts are holding these guys hostage." You can't hold anybody hostage in the NFL. But yeah, so there's going to be some processes going on. I expect some actually pretty significant turnover on the roster from where things are going, on the defensive and offensive sides of the ball. I think this is going to look very different at the
Yes.
start of training camp than what it looks like, right now. So there's a lot of good work going on. But yeah, we'll have more on this as the week goes on. We'll have some really good write ups coming out. So check out the website, check out the articles. I'm uh, excited to get this process started now, because now that we have a little bit of clarity about the direction they're going in, this is when all the real work gets to start. So I'm excited.
And remember, guys, now that we know who the coach could possibly be, it's more than likely going to be Shane Steichen. Of course, that cloud is always hanging over our heads until pen meets paper. Nothing is official yet, but still, be on the lookout for the start of our annual series, playing GM of the Indianapolis Colts. Landon is going to kick us off on February 23rd. Then it's going to be myself the very next week, and then it's going to be Marcus. Now that we know where we're going, Landon, I suppose now you know who, you need a draft, who you need a sign, trade, cut, I assume, right?
Well, I don't know if you ever really know, because if you're doing this correctly, you're not going to know until probably the end of April. So this is kind of like a fun little quick version. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's having a coach and knowing the direction they're going in, at least as far as where they're likely heading scheme wise and stuff like that. Yeah, it does make things a lot easier for sure.
Hey, at least they didn't wait to hire him on February 22nd. Like, at least
No,
that, right?
yeah, give me one day. Give me one day to get all this prepared.
Right. But anyways, guys, thank you for checking this episode out. We'll have more news along the week as things get more official and we start looking at the potential hires on the offensive staff, and as well looking at at the team as it is. So other than that, guys, he is Landon. I am Michael. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Enjoy the food. Drink responsibly and have some great food. Have a great time, guys. Y'all stay safe out there. We'll see you soon.